We feel that this is a great moment when all of us have joined together to collaborate on this very important, significant theme, role of private sector for women's empowerment. Looking at the webinar, what we intend doing is to create awareness among the private sector companies across the OIC region about the women empowerment principles, which mean gender equality and women's empowerment adds value to the business. It has to establish a high-level corporate leadership, treating women and men fairly at the workplace, ensuring the health, safety, well-being protocols, promoting education and training, promoting community and advocacy initiatives on gender equality, and most importantly, reporting progress on whatever has been done by the private sector companies. So with this, backdrop, I would like to share that in Pakistan, 73 private sector companies have endorsed to the women empowerment principles. You will be hearing about in the subsequent sessions. Just to give you an idea that we have very eminent speakers today on the panel. Ms. Amy Baum, who is an international consultant on women's economic empowerment and works with the Asia Pacific We Empower Asia program with UN Women, and she has been working on it since 2020. And she has supported development of innovative approaches to address the unequal burden, women's unpaid care work, and technical guidance to the private sector companies for engaging on gender equality. The second panelist is Alia Jaffer, who has just briefly introduced herself. And she is a believer of the private sector because she holds them as an important partner to implement SDGs, and she brings 23 years of global experience in leadership positions from across multiple sectors, specializing in building valuable brands and companies. The third panelist is Mr. Mubin Chuktai, who is corporate sustainability communication and corporate social responsibility professional, has been working for the last 15 years with different organizations. And at heart, he is a feminist who's passionate about the uplift of women in society. And he has been able to design a large-scale women entrepreneurship project in Pakistan while he was working with LUMS. And he is currently engaged with Surti, which is a big company in Pakistan in the textile sector. And lastly, we have Yasmin Jaswal, who heads the communication and partnership section in UN Women. I must share with you that today Sharmila was called for a very high-level government meeting, and she had to leave. We also have Zara Bisharat Higgs, sorry for mispronunciation, who is the Director Corporate Communication and Sustainability at Jazz. We must acknowledge that Jazz is a web signatory, and so is Surti. And she brings 14 years of experience in communication, strategy, media, public relations, crisis management, sustainability, and branding. And she's very passionate about setting up sustainable structures and delivering innovative and impactful solutions. Without any fail, I would move to the next part of the agenda, which is a presentation on what is women empowerment principles and what does these mean to the private sector. Because when we say women empowerment principles, WEP, an acronym which is frequently used, gender equality promotes gender equality, which means business. So let's hear from Emmy, and you will be getting the details about these global gender equality standards and see how they can be adapted, used, or endorsed by your companies. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Faria. I'll go ahead and take the floor. Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Amy, and I'm joining everyone tonight from Bangkok, Thailand. And I'm very, very happy to be here amongst UN Women colleagues and the Islamic Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture, and also a few of the WEP signatories in our region. Going to go ahead and share screen. I do have a few slides. I won't spend too much time on all of them, but I did want to kind of give a bit of background to what we're doing and, of course, give some context on the WEPs and also provide some tools and resources we have to support implementation of the WEPs across the region. And I think the ultimate point I want to drive home is how we can leverage the WEPs, women's empowerment, and this toolkit of the principles to benefit business and drive inclusive growth. So I want to give a bit of context to start first. I'm probably not telling you any new information, but just to give a bit of background, we know that gender inequality is still quite high in the Asia Pacific. And I know that we're joined by a lot of different countries in the region tonight, but our program, which I'll speak about in a minute, is primarily focused in Asia Pacific, but we do have Pakistan included here for many of those joining us tonight. And so we know that in several different areas, in work, in services, in the regulatory and policy environment, and also physical security, gender inequality is still high. And one statistic I would like to point out is that in 2020, the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report stated that if Asia Pacific countries continue at the current rate, reaching gender gap or closing the economic gender gap would take 100 years. So I just want to point that out as the 2020 statistic. So not only, of course, can women's empowerment benefit societies, it's a human rights principle by foundation, but there's more and more study and more research to make a stronger and stronger business case each year that gender equality and women's empowerment actually drives performance, increases innovation, drives productivity, leads to cost savings, increases market share, builds trust and credibility among consumers, shareholders, other stakeholders, and employees and the like. And there's a global estimate here. There's a global estimate of $12 trillion that can be added to the global economy. And in the Asia Pacific, this number is 4.5 trillion if we advanced women's equality and empowerment. And I think for many businesses, not only does women's empowerment benefit the business bottom line, but it's also essential to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular SDG 5, which is centrally focused around gender equality, but it also intersects with other SDGs. Gender equality is also integral to all of the SDGs, and in particular as well for decent working conditions for women and all employees. And I don't want to focus too much on this slide. There's a lot of information, but I'll share these afterwards if anyone's interested. But I think one of the key points to keep in mind, particularly now, as we're in our second year of COVID-19, COVID-19 has really placed us at a crossroads in every region in the world. The benefits or the hardest hit populations have been women by and large, and especially women in the private sector, small and medium-sized enterprises. The burden of unpaid care work that women both in the informal and formal workplace take on has increased. And so just to go back to that previous statistic, it's now estimated that it'll take 135 years to close the gender gap after COVID-19. So we really at a major point of crisis and a time to really turn the tides. And of course, this takes the ecosystem, this takes private sector, public sector playing a role, but there's a crucial role for private sector to play as well. And we've seen more innovation and we've seen more progress in private sector stepping up in the last few years. So To work on this enabling environment and enhance private sector action for women's economic empowerment, our program that's run out of the UN Women Regional Office is called We Empower Asia. So we're a program funded by the European Union, and we're primarily operating in these 7 Asia Pacific countries, but we do also expand our efforts across the Asia Pacific region, which includes Pakistan in our office. And we're seeking to get more women to lead and participate in business in the private sector. And we do work on policy advocacy, working with governments to create better policy environments and regulatory environments. We also have an arm supporting women entrepreneurs. When it comes to our work with the private sector, whether it's multinationals or SME, we leverage our holistic framework called the Women's Empowerment Principles. And as we lovingly call them, the WEPs, which you'll hear time and time again tonight. So the Women's Empowerment Principles are a set of 7 principles that were launched in 2010 by UN Women and UN Global Compact as really the first holistic framework to leverage action in companies across the value chain. So I'll go into a bit of detail about each of these 7 principles, but we always like to visualize it as a value chain because it starts with corporate commitment and leadership, and it moves into the workplace, into looking at different standards for workplace, and then down into marketplaces where you look at who you're supplying from, where you're looking at providing education and training for women entrepreneurs, also looking at how you can make your own suppliers have better gender diverse practices, whether or not they're women-owned businesses. And then also looking into the work in the community and advocacy within industries. And as Faria greatly mentioned, sort of foundational underneath with transparency and reporting and measuring what you're doing and taking steps to improve it and setting action plans to really advance across the different areas. So since I'm presenting the WEPs, again, I have some busy slides. I'm not going to go into all the details, but I did just want to provide a few more highlights of each principle and how some of the actions look like and what could be done by companies to implement them. So when we talk about principle 1, gender equal corporate leadership, we're really looking at that commitment coming from the CEO, coming from the highest decision makers. We know that it takes multiple departments, but if we have that commitment secured from the highest level, it sends a message and it goes down throughout the organization much stronger. This is also looking for leaders to engage different stakeholders to set policies to make public and external commitments, and also to focus on diverse boards and governance bodies. We know that women in leadership is, of course, still an area where all countries need to improve across the region. And then moving into the workplace, there are a few different principles that focus on the workplace. And we also view workplaces within the WEPs because it's holistic, not just as the main office or the HQ building, but also going into factories and other workplaces where all employees are covered. So equality in the workplace can look at non-discrimination policies, looking at your hiring practices, retention and promotion, equal pay, which is another area that we're very eager to tackle. Looking at building a pipeline for women to join the ranks and lead up to become leaders and in management positions. And particularly in light of COVID-19, looking at flexible workplace policies, looking at instituting childcare on site or nearby for your employees, providing dependent or subsidies for childcare benefits to support working women to be able to stay in working positions and take advantage of full-time employment. Employee health and safety is, of course, another key area. And we're not just looking at safe working conditions or good labor conditions for female workers. We're also looking for strong zero tolerance policies towards sexual harassment, having strong and confidential grievance mechanisms in place and support provided and training for all employees. This can also include access to health insurance and services and paid time off for medical care and counseling. And the final principle that kind of bridges workplace and marketplace, well, this is education and training for women. And so this can be part of the workplace to provide training programs or other kind of innovative programs for young women, young talent, or junior executive networking and mentoring opportunities that might be designed specifically for female workers, depending on the context or the hours that those normally take place. Establishing a business case for women's empowerment, and also trying to raise women up and measure where women are in non-traditional jobs, or looking at area within your workforce and within your value chain of where women have the least ratio of positions, and where you can get more women into non-traditional roles, whether that's science and technology or otherwise. And this can also extend a bit into the marketplace when you look at providing trainings for women in the community who might be able to become part of your workforce, or otherwise entrepreneurs, to start to diversify your supply chain. So Principle 5 is where we really see a lot of companies just starting to develop and work more. We see a lot of work done on workplace, but Principle 5 is still difficult for many. I think it's a new area. So looking at gender responsive procurement, trying to measure the percentage of women-owned businesses that you buy from, the percentage of procurement spend on women-owned or women-led businesses. Globally, only 1% of public procurement is spent on women-owned businesses. So it's a huge untapped market, first of all. And we've also seen with supply chain disruptions in COVID, having supplier diversity is also a protection mechanism for when we encounter future crises. This can also include credit and lending barriers to women entrepreneurs, gender responsive media and advertising. So this can also entail marketing and advertising practices that try to avoid gender stereotypes or try and reverse stereotypes. And also products and services designed specifically for women. So quite an exciting area for Principle 5. And then diving a bit deeper into the value chain, looking at the community. And so this can be CSR activities and different commitments of working through either communities where some of your employees live or other communities in the country, working with stakeholders. This can also be advocating within your industry and with other peers and other large corporates that are in your specific area. So this can be recognizing women's leaderships or taking a stand and working with other stakeholders. Perhaps you take part in a multi-stakeholder initiative, you take part in events like this to speak out about the benefit of the WEPs. So it's not just looking at the kind of the non-work community, but also the peer private sector community, so that we also create some movement and peer influence. And finally, for us, one of the most important principles and an area that we are really strongly advocating a lot more in our own program this year is to really start measuring and moving towards publicly reporting. So we know that a lot more companies are advancing in their ESG reporting and starting to report on more gender indicators in their sustainability reports or publicly. But we still want to see this, of course, go a bit farther. We see now many companies reporting on women in leadership, and we would like to start moving towards some other indicators that we can report on that do really reflect progress towards gender equality. And I'll speak to this just a little bit later. So this is an overview of the WEPs. I'll watch my time, I promise. So joining the WEPs community, this is what it's all about, is becoming part of this community. And so any private sector organization, whether they're 5,000 employees or even self-employed, can become a WEPs signatory. And the WEPs is also open to chambers of commerce and also stock exchanges and business and industry associations as well, who are bringing together businesses. And it's 3 very simple steps. You download this CEO statement of support, and it's signed by either the local CEO or the managing director at that office that has the highest designation. You fill out a short application online, and then it's reviewed by our internal team, and then you become a signatory. And as of today, I think we have about 5,400 global signatories. And as Faria said, we have 73 in Pakistan currently, which is quite a good number for Asia Pacific. It's fantastic. We see a very high number in Pakistan, and they have a very long history of becoming WEP signatories. And there's many benefits to joining the community. It's a global community with worldwide recognition. It's weps.org is the main website. There's opportunities to connect, there's resources, there's case studies, there's guidance notes. There's also diagnostic tools to look at your gender pay gap. Our program is also in the process of developing more tools and resources. And just a note that reporting is not obligatory on the webs. And also we sometimes get companies who are a bit hesitant to sign because they think we can't possibly address all 7 principles. And in truth, almost no company is able to address all 7 principles perfectly at once. What the webs, signing the webs really states is that you have an organization-wide commitment and aspiration to work towards these 7 principles and acknowledge that as an organization, you want to take this holistic approach across the value chain. So we welcome companies, whatever stage they are at, to sign on and commit and join, and as we call it, start their journey with us, so to speak. And also on webs.org, there are a number of ways you can showcase your efforts. You can create a company profile, where you can update and report on information. There are webs case studies where you can write about the actions that you've taken and what you've done in a certain principle. Quote cards can also be made by any CEO, and we feature these on our social media, and also leadership insight profiles. So there's not only ways that you can benefit and get engaged, but also ways to get visibility for the work that you've done across the webs. And so I do want to speak a little bit, and maybe I'll take my last 5 minutes to speak a bit about this webs journey that we have. So we, of course, want people to join and sign on, but we see this as a continuous journey of activating the principles, measuring your progress, starting to implement, sustaining that progress, and then reporting on progress, and then continuing the cycle to keep getting better and better and better. And so one of the first things we offer, actually, that anyone joining today could take part in, you don't have to be a signatory to do this. It's a free online tool available to anyone. It's called the WEPS Gender Gap Analysis Tool, and we call this the GAT. And this is a very long-standing, comprehensive assessment of 18 questions that looks across those different pillars, so leadership, workplace, marketplace, and community. And you answer the questions. It will be filled out by HR teams, maybe the procurement team as well, some other communications teams, and it will actually show you where you stand in each of these pillars. It gives you a comprehensive diagnostic, and it gives you a place of where you stand, whether you're a WEPS beginner, an improver, or a leader, achiever, or a leader. And it also tells you the specific areas where there's room for improvement. So it gives you that specific percentage and allows you to look at where exactly you need to start taking action to improve. We do also have a WEPS action planning tool. I know some companies prefer to use their own action planning tools. We do have a WEPS action planning tool that's been developed, and we're currently in the process of translating it to an online tool that you can actually use, like the GAT tool. And so the GAT, when you take it, all the information is completely confidential. Even UN Women only sees the aggregate results. And it's actually designed as a tool that you can take every year so that you can assess your progress year by year and see the areas where you still need some improvement, where you're doing really well, and look at where you have the most room to grow. And also, once you have taken the GAT and started to implement an action plan, another thing, of course, we advocate is reporting. And I can share the link after to this. We've recently developed the WEPS Transparency and Accountability Framework, which is actually, in the 10 years of existence of the WEPS, the first full accountability framework that will allow a set of indicators for you to measure progress on the areas most likely to lead to gender equality and benefits. And so in this transparency and accountability framework, we've broken it down to a set of essential indicators and complementary indicators. And there's 8 essential indicators that any company has the data to and could pull the data to be able to report immediately. And these are the ones that we're really advocating each company begin reporting on. What we've also recently added on webs.org for signatories is a function to be able to report on your progress. And so after you've become a signatory and you create your company profile, you can go in and then you can start to report on progress. And the great thing as well is you can make this public or private. So if you want to report on one number that you're really doing great on, you can make this public and then it can be seen in the progress reports. If you just want to track internally still and you're not ready to share, you can move it to private and then only the company sees that information. So this is really a way that you can drive from joining to assessing to action and implementation and then reporting. And of course, the more companies we have reporting, the more we build the momentum, the more we build the movement, the more we have transparency in certain issues, and we really advance on progress. So a lot of tools and resources available just on webs.org. And I think the last thing I'll leave you with for now, and I'll stick around for questions, is that on our We Empower Asia website, there's always the webs.org website where you can get any more information on the WEPs, and I'll send the link through the chat as well. But also on our We Empower Asia website, we have a bunch of different publications. We have some really great resources. We have other videos of how companies have taken progress and what they've done. We have some different research reports that can really help companies to take steps in a bunch of different ways. So I will end it there for now. I'll stick around and happy to answer any other questions on the WEPs because I could talk about it for a very long time, and I will certainly share the presentation afterwards with anyone. And so I'll hand it back to you, Faria.
Thank you, Amy. We will have question and answers at the end of the panel discussion. I think what you have underscored very rightly is the gender gap, especially after COVID-19. It is going to take 135 years to close. And how do we do it? The ecosystem where private public sector has a role to play. Well, there are different aspects of leadership, workplace, marketplace, and communities who have to be on board to really make this happen. And 7 principles, WEP principles, are a set of gender equality standards, promoting gender action plan, transparency, accountability. So Amy has very precisely outlined the details, and women empowerment remains our focus. With this, I would invite Alia Jaffer to highlight the role of Islamic Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture in accelerating women empowerment. And we would like to see that how this role can be enhanced and what can be the mechanisms or platforms to collaborate. Over to you, Alia.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And Amy has shared some really significant numbers with us today. So something really to think about. I'm going to start off with just a brief presentation about what the Islamic Chamber of Commerce is. So if everyone can see my screen. Okay. So the Islamic Chamber of Commerce is part of the OIC family, which is the second largest multilateral after the United Nations. And we are the sole and the largest representative of the private sector of the Muslim world, and through their apex chambers of commerce. Now, in 2019, the whole Islamic Chamber sort of was revamped, and then our renewed strategy is actually now focused on expanding the role of the OIC private sector in realizing the United Nations SDGs Agenda 2030, as well as the OIC Program of Action 2025. So as you know, most of the countries that are within the OIC region are from the South-South region, and most of them are developing countries, and some of them are the least developing countries. So what the 3 strategic pillars that we're working on now is one, to be an engine for mobilizing investments in priority areas that are important to these countries. Number 2, influence policy making related to the private sector. And number 3, the development of the private sector and its representatives, which is the chambers of commerce. And so investment is actually a very important area, because this is really considering the youth population of the OIC countries, it's extremely important not only to be able to sort of use the existing private sector infrastructure to create jobs, but also to enable entrepreneurship, because that is really going to be the way we are able to fulfill the kind of jobs that need to be created, the demand for it. So investment forums is one of the ways we're looking to do that by bringing together sector-specific ecosystem holders, stakeholders, to exchange sort of knowledge, best practices, engage the government, the international organizations, private sector entities, academia, everyone to sort of sit on platforms to talk about sector-specific policies that need to happen. Number two is we're establishing Waqf companies. And in fact, one of the things that I would like to share with the team today is that Islamic Chambers has been hosting business women forums for the past, I believe, 15 years. And one of the outcomes of those business forums was the creation of an Islamic microfinance bank in Sudan, which today has 50% of their portfolio is actually for women. And it's quite significant because they have 99% repayment of their loans. And they have 44 branches across Sudan, some in the most remote areas. And so that is, financial inclusion is one of the key areas which we believe is very important for women to empower themselves, especially in the rural areas, in the agriculture sector. So that is an example of the areas that we are investing in. So as a result, we are now working on creating an Islamic microfinance bank, starting with the G5 Sahel countries. Aside from this, agriculture, commodity and exchange markets, we're developing that, as well as Green Waqf, which is a really interesting concept. It's about using unproductive land to be able to generate livelihoods and income for the communities around it. Again, as I understand, more than 50% of the population is women. And so what we're looking at is, in the past, where it was more sort of organizing events and bringing women together, now we're investing in projects that are able to empower women financially, as well as job creation for them, that will sort of support us bring in, or rather crowd in, private sector investments into those priority areas also. So I'm going to just sort of stop over here and just share a little bit about the role of women. So the topic of our discussion today is empowering women. And in my personal opinion, what I've noticed is that it's really the women who empower the private sector, because the performance, and Amy shared some of this evidence with us today, it's really now the opportunity for us to be able to share this information as broadly as possible with the private sector organizations of the OIC. And that is one of the reasons why we were so keen on sort of collaborating with UN Women to bring this session today. And I hope that we will continue to keep the momentum going to be able to really help the private sector see the value that it adds. So while the Islamic Chambers is investing in businesses and those areas that are important for financial inclusion, as well as creating jobs, we're also bringing together international organizations who have the information as well as the tools to be able to support the private sector in their agenda. So with that, I'm going to stop if there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Alia. As I indicated, that we'll be taking the questions as we end the panelists' sharing. What is very importantly underlined by you is the role of private sector, and what can be options be there to really walk the talk. And what is very important is that we need to come up with knowledge, practices, information, which has to be shared across board so that there is learning and there are models to demonstrate what has worked, what has fast tracked, and how we can really, really empower women. So, with these words, I would like to invite Mr. Mobeen Chukkai, and he would share the experience of Surti. How did they walk the talk? Over to you, Mobeen.
Thank you very much, Faria. Hi to all the attendees and the panelists. I'll start off with saying that it's very intimidating for men to be surrounded by very competent ladies, and I do feel that I'm feeling a bit of that. So please be kind. I may mess up at some point in time. So I'll tell you a bit about Surti. Surti is Pakistan's largest vertically integrated denim manufacturer and exporter. We are present in 3 continents, 7 countries, and so we have a facility, a manufacturing facility in Bangladesh. So I'll be drawing very heavily from our experiences there as well to give you a bit of comparison of why we're doing what we're doing. At the start of my presentation, 1 minute. So can you guys see this? Okay. So back in 2018, we realized at an organizational level that we wanted to induct more female workers, both at practically all tiers of the organization, and especially focusing on the factory floors, because textiles overall, and that leads us to the problem. Textiles have historically been a female-led enterprise. In fact, I read somewhere that the effect of opening a textile manufacturing plant in a community is that for a 5-mile radius, and this is of course survey data, the overall decision-making representation in family decisions for females rises just because there is a textile manufacturing unit in the area. So that is what the effect of a textile unit has on the lives of women, not even by engaging with them at the outset. Unfortunately, over the last 4 decades, we've seen that this number of females in the textile sector has dwindled down from 60 to 70% down to practically 15 to 20% now. And that's a huge problem for us. And the reason we can say that is because we have manufacturing units in Pakistan, and we have manufacturing units in Bangladesh, and we have a radically different experience from running both of them. In Bangladesh, we have anywhere between 70 and 80% of women who are working on the factory floors. And just to give you an idea, the absenteeism, for example, in Bangladesh is around 3.6 to 3.7. Whereas in Pakistan, it stands at, on good days, above 10%, and on really bad days, around 15%. And in Pakistan, like I said, we have 15 to 25% ladies working on, depending on which part of the year we're talking about. So that's just one metric, and there are many. We found that female workers are much easier to manage. They're much more dedicated to their work, and even in terms of human biology, for example, we have a process in which we check quality for our products, and that requires visual acuity as one of the metrics of selection. And all of those departments are practically led by females, because that is just a part of what the human anatomy is. They just perform better. They pass their tests much better than men do. So that's practically our business case for having more women or focusing on. So in 2018, when we realized that this was something that, and I'll come to the point of why this is also and should be a compliance issue. But when we realized that there was a genuine business case, and we realized that we didn't really have much support in terms of doing what we wanted to do. So we reached out to the community directly. And that was through our project. I'm going to skip this because it's really embarrassing that Pakistan is fourth from the bottom. It's ridiculous. And the only country in our region that is worse off than us is Afghanistan. And that kind of tells you a lot too. So the reason that we went into this enterprise of launching a project which we call the Surti Enhancing Women's Service, played on words, it translates to SUSE, is because of all of these reasons. And we reached out to the community in our area, which is Korangi. Korangi is Pakistan's largest industrial district. It houses around 2 million people. So just on average, we'd say about more than 1 million of these would be females. Quite a few of them work in our factories and other factories in the area. So that's our target audience for the project. We believe that, and in our experience at that point in time, we believe that this was more of a cultural issue rather than one of policy or one of logistics or expediency. Men simply were not interested in sending women to work in factories, and that's the long and short of it. Men are decision makers in the Pakistani context or in any other patriarchal or third world developing society. What was happening was that the entire country is deprived of that contribution that women can make as a part of their work. And it is most stark in the industrial context because we measure product versus time, and then all of these other metrics feed into it as well. So we have a very concrete understanding of what we're being deprived of. So we initiated a project, like I said, the Surti Enhancing Women's Service, the purpose of which was to enhance the induction of females on our factory floors in specific, and across all tiers of the organization in general. Keeping in view the cultural constraints and the constraints of being a private sector entity, we partnered with certain organizations, which included the UNDP, which included Sustainability Agents, which is a Berlin-based think tank that designed the overall project for us, and the Thespians Theatre Group Foundation, which is a local street theatre NGO that specializes in community street theatre. So upon doing that, yeah.
So you have 5 more minutes.
Okay. So our implementation, I'll just run into some visuals from the street theatre to give you an idea of what we were doing. Sorry. So these were the number of performances that we did of a very specially designed play, and the play revolved around a young girl who had received education but wanted to work, and the family didn't want her to work, and how that plays out. So one of the very unexpected and very welcome outcomes was that 22% of those attendees, we surveyed around 1,700 people from all of them that attended, and 22% of people changed their minds about female work and how they perceived it, and whether they would support the family female potential workers to come into the industry after that. Over the last 1 year, 25% of all new inductees within our factories have been from this project. So that really shows that if the private sector takes certain initiatives, there is a lot of opportunity for what good can be achieved. But it also identified for us a lot of lessons, a lot of limitations that we have as the private sector as well. I'm going to share some of those insights with you. Before I do that, we have some success stories, and there was this lady called Shazia Suba, who is a part of the first cohort and went through the entire, well, what we envisioned was how this was going to play out. And this is our test case of a lady whose family male member saw the play, changed his mind, advocated within his family for this lady to get a job. She came to Surti, was trained, got a job, and still works at Surti, and we're very proud of that. So I'll have you guys see what she's saying. So eventually this became phase one of our project, running from 2018 to 2020. And now for 2021, we had a break for COVID because nothing could be done in those. We are much like any other organization, was stumped by it. But now we've partnered with the UN, UN Women in particular, to institute phase two of this project, which looks inwards because of certain lessons that we've learned from instituting phase one. One of them was that the reason that male members are, well, one of the reasons, and or perhaps the primary reason why men don't want to send their women to work is because of the perception that the industry has within the community. And that's something that we're targeting and want to change. So we partnered with UN Women for phase two of the SEWS project, which is a series of awareness sessions and trainings on gender sensitivity, and also the general empowerment of women, specifically factory women, on issues of health, financial literacy, and also highlighting issues of violence against women. Because COVID-19 has also resulted in this coming to light in recent months. So that's something that we're targeting. We're other than UN Women, we're also partnering with the BSR, which is a German NGO, which institutes the HER project in different industrial manufacturing entities through our retail buyers. And that's something that we're also very proud of. And I was over the last 1 week, we've surveyed about 500 ladies from our factory, and we've come to the realization that not only is this crucial from a moral point of view for organizations or a social responsibility point of view, but some of the issues that we're listening to are also business related. And that's something that I want to petition the UN Women on, or any organization that is relevant to this issue, is to make this a compliance issue for organizations like us. So businesses only understand incentives. So if what Amy was describing was an optional disclosure, I think that this should be, at some point in time, I can understand this is very initial for your organization as well. But at some point in time, this should not be an optional disclosure. I think it should be mandatory, and it should be audited. And beyond that audit, some kind of rating system should be developed for organizations that are doing well in these metrics, and that should have some kind of feedback to business and sales. Because without this, I don't think any kind of intervention is going to be successful. So I think I might have gone above time.
You have, I would thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mubin. Very rightly, you have said that there is a dire need to increase the participation of women in private sector, be it as workers. This is a reality. It's a business case. And what you have rightly pointed out is changing mindsets. But changing mindsets has to be augmented by providing safe work environment. And this is what is all endorsed in WEPs. This is all WEPs. This is all walking the talk of WEPs. And I'm sure Surti Enterprise has taken these initiatives and has further endorsed and enhanced its investment in promoting women's empowerment. Thank you, Mubin. Now I would request Zara Basharat Higgs, who represents Jazz. Over to you, Zara.
Thanks a lot, Maria, and hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today and also to speak on a topic that is that resonates so well with me, both personally and professionally. So just to give you a background, Jazz signed on as a web signatory back in 2018, and it really is a part of the ethos of who we are as an organization, how we function, how we're set up, how we do business. And every time we sit down to draft strategy for our digital sustainability and we think about our impact on communities, there's something that is the driving force behind it. So when you talk about internally, I'm happy to report that 3 members out of our executive leadership team are women. Our chief people's officer, our chief legal officer, our chief compliance officer are all women. And of course, the Jazz is very committed to having more women as part of the workforce, but I think it's also very crucial to have women in senior leadership positions because they bring that value addition when it comes to making important decisions and policy making, which will not affect just the organization, but also communities going forward. And we certainly don't want to miss out on that. And I think women also require support in their careers at different levels. We have a program called Momentum that we've just launched. That is for women who are joining back from their maternity leave. And I remember when I had my son and I joined back in the workforce, I had concerns about myself, I won't be able to attend an important stakeholder dinner in the evening, or I won't be able to travel for work. Does that compromise my equity in the organization? Am I not going to be seen as a good resource anymore? So I think programs such as these are really, really important to sort of say that, that's fine, we'll adjust to your reality, because both these roles are, equally, if not more important in your life. Another program which really dives into what Amy, you said about professional development for women. We have a program called Phoenix that is geared towards women who are at very early stages in their career. So it's really, sitting down with them, hey, what do you think? Where's the area that you would like to improve? And how does that coincide with the organization priorities? So let us help you do that. And I think that's so important because as women, we second guess ourselves. And I've certainly done that. Am I ready for that promotion? Should I raise my hand? Oh, no, maybe not yet, maybe. But, our female colleagues are much more enthusiastic about it. So I think, Phoenix is just a program that is geared to doing that. And I also feel sometimes the simplest of initiatives have the biggest impact. At one of our recent town halls, our CEO, Amir Ibrahim, announced that, he wants to have a quarterly coffee, tea, or lunch with 15 or 20 women from the organization, not just in Islamabad, but also in regional offices, and just to listen. Because I think one of the most important part of enabling women empowerment, so to say, is to listen to women, to do a pulse check. How are the women in your organization feeling? Are they feeling empowered? Or, did we miss out on something? So I think that's a sense check that we want to do with our female colleagues on a quarterly basis. And Amir also signed up, to a coalition to be a champion of change, which is, an initiative by the Australian High Commission in Pakistan. And it's really geared towards, Amy, what you also said earlier, that it has to come from the top. So CEOs of companies getting together, sharing best practices, sharing ideas on how they can really champion women empowerment. So that was a little bit about how, what we're doing internally in the organization, but let's come down to how what we do. And I think digital connectivity, of course, is such a key component on bridging some of those really crucial gender divides that are out there. And I know all of my fellow panelists have shared some really ominous figures on what women are doing. And I don't want to add to that, but, the mobile connectivity in Pakistan, especially for women, is the figures are horrifying. But the reason why we're doing that, because there is a business case for it, as all of you have said. Just bridging that gap could lead to a 54% revenue increase for the mobile industry that is amounting about to $130 million. So it makes business sense for us to do it. So one of the things that we did was just to address the taboos around women owning a phone in Pakistan, is that on Women's Day, we work with marketing and we launched a campaign where a woman could walk into any of our franchises and buy a 4G digit Jazz phone for 1,000 rupees. That could also be, you could also get it on installments, and they would get a 4G SIM for free. So, but of course, we have to understand that the taboos around owning a phone are not so simplistic. They're very, very complex. And that's where the government and the private sector, and other stakeholders come in to really address those concerns. And I want to really end my presentation with just talking about a few of the sustainability initiatives that we're doing. So whenever we design a program, we want to ensure that at least 50% of our participants are going to be women. An example of that is that we're working with UNDP and we're doing these SDG boot camps all across Pakistan. And the idea really is to train around 800 social enterprises over the course of the next 2 years. We just finished one of our boot camps in Balochistan, and the winner of the boot camp is actually this really interesting enterprise. It's called Digital Libas, and what they do is that they provide tailoring services, virtually to clients. So I think it's really interesting on how really the sky is the limit when you enable women and give them access to those opportunities. And of course, another really important component with what we're focusing on is digital literacy. So we just finished what we call the Jazz Smart School program, and we worked with about 75 female public sector schools to improve, to help teachers improve on how they're teaching the kids, but also sort of increase accountability. So we trained about 1,500 teachers, and you'd be surprised to know that 60% of those teachers had never really accessed a computer in their life, and about 63,000 female students benefited from that program. I just want to end my presentation by saying that it's a journey, something that we're deeply, deeply committed to, and we're learning. We're very open to learning and listening. And I'm so happy to be part of that forum, because everything between you and Amy and Alia have talked about, I've been taking down notes, taking mental notes, and really thinking about how we can incorporate and taking it back to Jazz and, becoming a better company and helping us on our women empowerment journey. And so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zara, for sharing the experience of Jazz. And I feel that the gender change, the needle is really moving fast in your teleco, and we would like others to learn from it. Yes, it is very important to have that pulse check with women. There are examples at our end, which my colleague would be sharing with you. And there is this clear-cut indication that investments in education, in digital literacy of women and girls does pay off and does contribute towards the SDGs and the overall development of the country. With these words, I would now like to invite Yasmin Jazwal, who would be representing Sharmila, and give the closing remarks and share UN Women's perspective on this very important aspect. Over to you.
Hello, thank you very much, Faria. And also thank you for everybody for a great collaboration today and all the contributions and presentations. I'm sure they were very insightful, and it's good to hear what everybody is doing. As we've discussed today, gender inequality is huge. And the WEPs is, I think, a really good way to take this forward. The 7 principles, if they're broken down into pieces, and if they are adhered to, this really is a start of private sector organizations, companies contributing towards a change and getting us onto a higher stepping, especially when it comes to the GDP. As Mobeen mentioned, we're fourth from the bottom. And also, as I think Amy mentioned, it could take up to 135 years. None of us have that sort of a time. But I'm really pleased to say that UN Women is now, over the last quite a few years, working very closely with the private sector companies, especially here in Pakistan and in other parts of the world. And I think that the private sector companies have a real role to play in this because they have their corporate social responsibility. They also, many of them are adhering to these WEP principles. As also mentioned earlier, women all over the world, really, they're resilient, they are strong, they're eager to get out there and to earn money. I won't speak about other countries, but at least in Pakistan, the women we meet are, enthusiastic and really willing to go out there. They don't want to be given sort of budgets. They want to be able to go out there, earn their own money, and also decide on how that money is spent. But unfortunately here, in many cases, although it's changing, women don't even have bank accounts. And although there is women's participation in employment, it's not real empowerment. Because in many cases still, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but, those women who are currently in employment get their wages and they're given back to the husbands. So I think here, the private sector have a great role to play because by offering women employment in companies, etc., it gives them a more of a legitimacy as well. No doubt, those women then would go on to have CNIC cards, which is a, national identity card, bank accounts, and money goes into their accounts directly, opposed to be given and then perhaps taken off them when they get home. So I think this is really, really good. The commitment, I think, also another proposal, I guess it is from our part, is that we know that private sector companies give percentages of, they have this corporate social responsibility. But what if we wanted to increase, or beg your pardon, reduce the time of what it takes to get women truly empowered economically? What if we could make a commitment that 50% of all proceeds, could go towards this cause? Because, if we hold hands collectively and move forward on this agenda and adhering to the WEP principles, I see nothing but success as far as women are concerned. And it really could help improve their situation and how the inequality currently exists. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yasmin. I think I must, share as the lead on women's economic empowerment in UN Women. Our experience of last 10 years has demonstrated investments made in the communities to empower women with an economic focus has led to financial autonomy, decent work conditions, and income security for these women. And when we talk of women's economic empowerment, it is about not only getting jobs, but it's about entrepreneurship as well. It's about them being suppliers to the big companies. So there are so many roles. And when we keep this in mind, there are 4 wins I would like to underscore. The gains which the private sector will have, the benefits the communities will accrue, the progress in development within the country, and lastly, the women and girls themselves. How do we take a step back and ensure that these 4 wins have to happen? And WEPS is just one of the tools. It's just one of the tools. So with these words, I would like to, close. I would wrap up after the session, after the question and answer session. I would now like to invite any questions from the floor to the panelists so that they can respond to the queries. Thank you. Is there anybody, Alia, looking at these questions from your end?
I think they should be. Yes, they've just put up a message also, if there are any questions.
Minute and then we can, move towards wrap up. With your permission, panelists, I'm moving towards the closing of the session. I would just like to thank on behalf of UN Women and Islamic Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture for this initial, dialogue, which has drawn together different actors and stakeholders, and which has allowed experience sharing. And we have seen that it has worked in Pakistan. It has shown demonstrated results in Asia Pacific. And now we are exploring a new, that is OIC region. And I would like to use the words Zara referred to. This is a journey and we are open to learning. Please come forward and let's join hands. And as an action point today, I would like to, propose that we should have some kind of forum which can be online, which meets regularly to share what has been accomplished, what are the bottlenecks, and where we can support and how to move forward. With these words, if there is any point you want to make from the panelists, this is all from me.
So I would just like to reinforce, Homa, what you just shared right now. Absolutely, I think such dialogues are very important. One of the things that I personally felt when I was working as an entrepreneur is the lack of social capital. And now in the tech, I've seen that there are a lot of these platforms that are there where people get together, women get together in the startup space. But I think that is an area, the more of us, if we can get together, talk, highlight these challenges. So from an Islamic Chamber's perspective, we would be very interested, and we will definitely go ahead and, sort of plan the same around the sector specific international forums that we have planned. So that this agenda, women are important in all sectors, they're relevant for all sectors. So we would definitely like to highlight that point in all of these forums, and looking forward to continued cooperation with the UN Women team. Thank you.
From your side, Amy and Zara and Mubin.
Yeah, sorry for I think that's just a question for me, which, do you mind if I just take it quickly?
Go ahead.
Gee, so there's a question, and Roxana wants to know, what has been your experience in providing mobile phones to women? Do they get to keep them, and are they able to use them freely, or do the men keep them? Well, Roxana, essentially this is a mindset issue, right? Which we could try to, and we are trying to address through our marketing campaigns, through our communication. There is no way to really monitor whether the men take them. The stats that we see indicate that men take them, but there's also an increase of just women awareness around mobiles and internet connectivity. So there is hope at the end of the tunnel, but a lot needs to be done because the way of thinking needs to change. So there is no way that we could potentially police them, or keep men in the household from taking the phone, because that's a personal issue. I hope that answers your question.
Else? Okay, thank you very much. What I would like to request from Islamic Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture, that please share the presentations with the participants, and we hope that we can formulate a WhatsApp group so that we can exchange information, share guidance, and what has worked and what has not. With these words, a great big thank you to all of you for being here, and my team who's sitting around the table, Mansoor, Humagul, Yasmin, and I'm really grateful that they have really worked so hard to make it happen. A big thanks to them, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Take
you
care.
so much.
Bye.
Thank you.